What up, guys? How you doing? Welcome back to the channel. See, when it comes to movie reviews, this has been one of the toughest ones for me to do because it's a special movie for me. I'm somebody who grew up hearing about Steven Spielberg, but I never really got to connect with him. Like I wouldn't say that I've watched a lot of his interviews or stuff like that I normally do with a lot of my favorite directors like Christopher Nolan, Ryan Coogler, and stuff like that, or Quentin Tarantino, where you've seen a lot of them. With Steven Spielberg, it often feels like you don't really get to see him. You don't really get to hear from him. But then there's that speech that he gave many moons ago that has set me on this path of becoming a filmmaker. So after watching the Fabelmans and realizing, wow, it's crazy how much as a filmmaker, your life is mirrored by each other. Like his experiences was different from mine. You can still find the similarities in whereby at every moment you're just trying to tell a story, you're constantly trying to capture these things. And how then do you make a review of such a movie which feels like, wow, this is a Steven Spielberg biography? It's your same biography. Because I'm pretty sure for a lot of filmmakers watching this and for a lot of filmmakers out there, your parents probably don't think that being a filmmaker is something that that's lucrative or something that's not a hobby. Like a lot of people treat this as a hobby. And rightfully so, what I mean, like how many directors get to make it, how many filmmakers get to make it, how much, it's a privilege to be a filmmaker, right? And you gotta work a real job, people say. And I partly understand that sentiment, right? Because this it's a privilege that most of us get to live, being on YouTube, doing all these things is like, it's a privilege. It's not something that's determined when you're coming up, like, oh, you get to do this for it.
Everything that a filmmaker puts him or herself into, even if it's somebody else's script and you're just picking the shots and directing the actors, your life is going to come spilling out onto celluloid, whether you like it or not. It just happens to all of us. But in the sense of the Fabelmans, it wasn't about metaphor, it was about memory.
And it's in this statement that made me want to make this video. When you're watching the Fabelmans, when it starts out young Steve, or I don't remember his name in the movie, he's taken to a cinema, he's watching a movie, he sees these trains crashing, and he wants to recreate that because there's just something about it that just doesn't make sense to him. Like, how did they do it? And he wants to do that to the point that he gets his father to get him to buy him a train, and then he just wants to crash them. It's not really to play with the trains. And he's on the come up, and his father is more determined for him to be an engineer, and his mom is like, express yourself, become who you want to be. And you go through this movie and you're like, what's gonna happen? And you start to see this weirdness. His mom was a piano player. His dad was more of his dad was an engineer, and then his dad always had a friend, and then his mom felt as if she was way too close with his dad's friend, which was like, this is weird. And that's something that you look at a Steven Spielberg movie and you're like, I like how the story is moving, but there's little subplots that are just pulling you away from that, where you're like, wait, did she just say that? Did she just say we cannot move without bringing your friend with you? And you're like, oh yeah, she actually did say that, she did say that, and it is hella weird. But the storyline, it moves forward. It helps us move the story forward, which is great. The next thing that I liked about the movie was just the depths and layers that it has of this family connection, but how much you can so relate to what's happening within the movie. The point whereby they have to move so that the father can work. How many of us have connected, started making friends, and started doing this, and then the next thing is your parent is like, well, a new opportunity has risen, we have to move, and you're like, what? Like, nah, dad, nah, mom, like, we can't do that. And for me, I remember as a young one, those were always the hard moments whereby you had to move, you had to leave your friends, you had to leave the life that you left. You lived and move on. And the other thing that I really liked was like how when he was a kid, he had the opportunity to start directing his own movies using his friends and making them superstars within their schools. They didn't even understand what was going on, but this was just the story of a young man going through life, and you're like, wow, I wish I had these opportunities. I wish I could have done this with my friends. I wish I could have. For me, being a filmmaker is something that came later in life. I wish really I had lived a life similar to what Steve did, because I feel like that would have carried me way far. But within the movie, you get that, and you get that sense of, man, I wish I had that life. I wish I had a camera when I was a young kid and coming up and just telling stories. But then also you get to appreciate, like, wow, I'm watching a legend's lifestyle. Like he said, it's about memory, right? It's his memories, what he's recreating. This is more of an autobiography more than it is just a fictional movie. And yes, as a filmmaker, you also understand that while great memories live within our minds, they don't really make great for narrative, right? So there's a lot of editing that goes into the movie. There's a lot of work that goes into the script. But what he's able to create and how he's able to tell that story, I thought, like, it just feels like a story of a young man coming into his own. We see the story of this filmmaker coming into his own. And the final shot with that director was like, what does he say? Analyze this picture. If the horizon is at the top, it's interesting. If the horizon is at the bottom, it's interesting. If the horizon is in the middle, it's shit. And in essence, there's not much you need to say more than that. Filmmakers understood what that meant. The audience, I'm hoping, understood what that meant. The twisted family relationship between him and his father is something that we all have experienced, and something that we don't hope for. As a kid, you want your parents' relationship to last because you want that. That's your father, that's your mother, that's the lifestyle that you want. And for your mom to cheat on your dad and you to know, that's a heavy thing to carry as a son, as a child. But also having that understanding of your father being like, you're a weak man. How could you let another man take your wife like that? You don't understand it. Those are things that you don't understand. And for him to put it in picture and to tell it as a story, man, this movie is phenomenal. If you haven't watched The Fabelmans, I encourage you to go do it. It's a phenomenal movie. It's a phenomenal story, especially if you want to make films. I don't know how many opportunities we will ever get to see a Steven Spielberg movie. Like, especially this is an autobiography. This is Spielberg on Spielberg. And I'm glad he called it The Fabelmans, because that just allows him to be in his directorial chair rather than making it more of like, oh, this is an autobiography. With that said, let me know what you thought of The Fabelmans in the comment section, and I'll definitely be checking in on you later.